Tonight I'm going to be going over one of my favorite offerings from the House of Guerlain. This one happens to be one of their more controversial releases. It gets a lot of hate in the fragrance community, and I just don't understand that. But I'm going to be giving you my opinions on what I think is an amazing offering from the House of Guerlain, Oud Essentiel. So I hope you can join me as I delve into what I think is one of the greatest releases from this house. Hey, welcome back to Real Scent Review. So tonight it's going to be Oud Essentiel from the Les Absolus d'Orient line from Guerlain. In my opinion, this line in general is one of the finest in all of designer perfumery. We also have the enormously popular and revered Santal Royal. There were other amazing ones from the line that unfortunately got discontinued. I'm thinking of Ombre Eternelle. I'm also thinking of Bois Mystérieux. Oh my God. Guerlain, why do you discontinue the best fragrances? Anyway, this is also a really, really nice one, and it's the one I'm going to be talking about tonight. In my opinion, Les Absolus d'Orient is one of the finest lines in all of designer perfumery. It's also one of the more accessible lines. And like I said, it's just such an amazing fragrance line. You really got to check it out if you're into fragrances. So getting into the presentation of this one here, this is the typical style of the Les Absolus d'Orient line. This particular bottle is dark green, and it has a beautiful spherical golden cap, which is actually made of plastic. Looks really cool though. It also has a ribbon around the front of it. I'm not sure if this is like an homage to Le Petit Robe Noire line of Guerlain, but it makes for a very elegant looking bottle design, that's for sure. So let's get a spray out of this beauty. Really fine sprayer here, very, very nice, high quality sprayer. Every bottle in the line is the same. Oh my goodness, the smell is intoxicating. So what I actually get in this fragrance is the following. In the top, I get oud, rose, and saffron. In the mid, I get leather and cedar. And in the dry down, I get cedar and guaiac wood. So yeah, upon initial spray, we're gonna be met with a very bitter, medicinal smelling oud. It is not the fecal or barnyardy style oud. Medicinal, very, very woody, kind of sharp. And that's met with some rose. Yes, the rose is present. It is quite detectable, but it is not a feminine style rose. What do I mean by that? It's not the type of rose that's typically associated with feminine fragrances. It's not overly sweet. It's not overly floral. It doesn't dominate, although it is detectable. So the rose in this one is just ever so slightly fruity. It's quite musky as well, and it adds just a slight floral type of freshness to the composition. It is not powerful, it is noticeable, but like I said, it does not dominate in the top. It is perfectly well blended with that oud and also some saffron. Now the saffron is going to give it a warm spiciness, maybe even a touch of earthy sweetness as well. It adds a nice dryness to the opening. It's a very dry style opening, and I think the saffron is a big contributor to that. So out of the three notes in the opening of this fragrance, I don't really find that one dominates over the other two. They're all very well blended together. Although you do detect each one individually, they're also just so well blended. It's really an amazing opening here. So in the midlife of this fragrance, a very smooth, dry leather starts to make itself known. Like I said, it's smooth, it's a little bit dry, it's ever so slightly leaning towards being animalic, but there's just like a sliver of animalicness to this leather. It's barely detectable, but if you really dig your nose into it, it is there. It is a little bit detectable, sure. And that's mixed with some cedar, a really nice cedar note in this. Very aromatic, very woody, very fresh, but there's a depth to this. It's extremely woody in the mid here. And yes, that's partly going to be due to the oud, but also cedar becomes really prominent in the mid here, adding more of a greenness to the composition. In the dry down, I get more of that woody, green, fresh, aromatic cedar, and it's mixed with some smoky guaiac wood. So there is definitely a smoky characteristic to this fragrance. It's not an overly smoky fragrance, like the smoke doesn't dominate every other note, but the smoke is definitely detectable. Very, very, very nice composition here. So if I had to put it very simply, what I really get the most of in this entire composition is rose, saffron, and woodiness. Now, there is definitely a good amount of smokiness, but the rose, the saffron, and the woodiness, I think, are more dominant. There's a distinct spiciness, there's a musky rose, and there's a heavy woodiness to this. Starts off very medicinal because of the oud, dries down into more of a green, fresh, aromatic type of wood. But at the same time, it never completely loses that medicinal tinge from the oud. Now, I'm gonna address the elephant in the room here. Is this actually real oud in the fragrance? I actually don't know, but if it is a synthetic oud accord, they've done a very good job with it. Because remember, real oud takes on many, many different scent profiles, depending on what part of the world it comes from, depending on how it's distilled. There's a bunch of different factors that go into how the finished oud product, the oud oil, actually smells. Real or not, this fragrance smells very, very nice. And first of all, I think the only people who do hate on this fragrance are honestly niche fragrance snobs. I personally think this is a really well blended fragrance. I think it's interesting. I think it's a great performer. I think it has depth. It's a really interesting fragrance. I truly do love it. However, I can see how it might be a little bit redundant to people who have a bunch of oriental fragrances, people who already have 50 oud, rose, saffron fragrances in their collection. I can see how this might not be really highlightable, for example. I can see how it might be a little bit redundant, like I said, to people who have several rose, oud, saffron fragrances. But I will say this, if you're just an average person who appreciates perfumery, I don't think there's any way that you're not going to find this beautiful, exciting, exotic, and just luxurious, because really that's what it is. Now, I'm also going to bring up the fact that, if you don't like this fragrance, if you don't like the style, that's fine. But what I'm saying is people who hate this one just because it smells similar to a lot of other Oriental style fragrances, I don't think that's really a good, solid reason to hate on a fragrance. Because at the end of the day, I don't think it can be denied that this is a really high quality, masterfully blended fragrance. And of course, there are going to be a lot of people out there who get mad at me for saying that. There are going to be people who disagree. That's fine. These are my opinions. Everybody is entitled to their own. I will admit, it is not the heaviest oud fragrance. For those collectors who are looking for a really bombastic animalic oud experience, you will not get that with this fragrance. However, compared to a lot of designers out there, compared to most designer fragrances with oud, this is a really good quality fragrance, and the oud is absolutely detectable in this. Although, like I said, it's not the animalic barnyard style. Definitely the medicinal, just very woody, sharp style oud. It is the same type of oud that is featured in Paris Monte Carlo's Oud Imperial, my favorite woody-based fragrance. It's also the same style of oud that's featured in Montal's Dark Oud, for example. So if you're familiar with those other two fragrances and you enjoy them, this is absolutely going to be a welcome addition to your collection. This one turns things up a bit, makes things a bit more complex compared to those other two. This one has the added florals, the spices, there's other notes in there playing around as well. It's not just focused on that medicinal oud like Dark Oud by Montal, like Oud Imperial by Paris Monte Carlo. I just use those two as an example because the same style of oud is being used in all three. So if you're familiar with one of them, you like one of them, you're absolutely going to love the other two. I would consider this to be a step up from things like Gucci Intense Oud, for example, from things like Black Afghano, from things even like Encre Noire à l'Extrême, for example. If you like any of those fragrances and you want something just a bit more complex, a bit better blended, a bit more, just with some more stuff going on, pick this one up. I don't think you're gonna regret it at all. It's a fine fragrance, but I will reiterate, if you're looking for a heavy animalic type of experience, you're not going to get that with this fragrance. But just because that's not what this fragrance offers does not mean that it is not worthy of praise and attention. I think it is a fantastic fragrance for what it offers. Gonna move on to the performance now. I've heard a lot of people complain about the performance, and again, I do not understand. On me, this is an absolute beast mode fragrance. It is up there comparable to things like Dior Sauvage Elixir. It is a very strong fragrance. And in the beginning, it is a little bit heavy. It's quite oriental. That oud especially could kind of shock people sometimes. A lot of times people complain about the oud rose combo can be nauseating a little bit. I will say the rose in this is not that type of jammy sweet rose. It's very well blended. If you think that you don't like rose in fragrances, I suggest giving this one a shot all the same, because I myself am not really a huge rose fan, but I absolutely love this fragrance. Even though the rose is detectable, it does not dominate the other notes. And like I said, the rose isn't really overly floral. It's more of a musky kind of, lightly floral tone that we get in this fragrance. Just really, really nice overall. But yeah, as far as like the actual performance, I don't know, man, this lasts all day. It's like a 10-hour scent on my skin, projects heavily for at least the first hour. Just, I have no complaints whatsoever about the performance. In fact, it's a very, very strong performer. Versatility, look, I would say for an oud fragrance, it's decently versatile. There will be people out there who are probably going to be turned off by this, but because it is not the animalic, fecal, barnyardy type of oud, I think, on the scale of all oud fragrances, it's a fairly versatile one. I might not wear this to the office. It's formal, it's elegant, it's really fancy, it's refined, and it's quite powerful. But I would wear this to any like special event outside the office, really. I might even consider wearing this on a date. If there's some familiarity, this might be a really sexy, polished, refined, alluring fragrance to wear for a situation like that too. My favorite part, the price. This can be had for, by the way, this is 125 milliliters. It's a big bottle here. $115 US on Fragrance Buy. That price is an absolute steal. And a lot of other members of this line as well. Some might be a little bit more expensive. Some might even be a little bit cheaper sometimes. But all in all, this is a very affordable fragrance line. From Guerlain, one of the best designer perfumeries just in existence. Guerlain is so important to the history of perfumery. I'm gonna have to do a separate video going over Guerlain. They're super important in designer perfumery, in general. Anyway, I digress. This one here, the price, insane. For what you're getting out of this fragrance, man, that price is a total steal. Also here in the European Union, it hovers right around 115 euros, 125 euros for the same volume. In fact, the last time I checked, this was going for 118 euros on Brasti. So in summary, I think this is a very well blended fragrance. I think it is elegant. I think it's very strong. I think it's exotic. I think it's exciting. Now, there are going to be people out there who think that this is redundant, but I think that the average person out there who appreciates perfumery is going to really like this one. In fact, I think a lot of times the people who like to crap on this one are a little bit of the elitist group, if I do say so myself. Anyway, I really like this fragrance. I don't understand where all the hate comes from. Pick this one up. If you like exotic scents, this isn't gonna disappoint you. Anyway, guys, that's been my review of Oud Essentiel by Guerlain. Hope you've enjoyed it. Until next time, keep it real.